Hello again, everyone. My name is George Valdes. I'm your host, and I'm head of marketing here at Monograph. I'm going to introduce our fantastic moderator, Marty Wood. Marty Wood is a writer, educator, and cultural producer interested in the intersections between art, architecture, and technology. He has published reviews, essays, and criticism in a variety of publications. He currently serves as the program director at the Architects newspaper for the long-running Facade Plus series and other architecture programs and events. Thank you to the Architects newspaper for being our exclusive media partner for Section Cut. And thank you, Marty, for moderating.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. I am very excited for this panel. Together with this group of Section Cut partners, is create a formidable tech stack which will help propel small and mid-sized firms forward. In this session, we're going to hear from them on how they're reinventing themselves to be more client and technology-centric, discuss the cultural changes needed to support innovation, and talk about the challenges and opportunities that they're seeing with tech adoption across our industry. We're calling it the new tech stack. With us today, we have a great group of speakers: Anna Kenoff, co-founder of Morpholio Apps; Kyle Bernhardt, CRO of Testfit; Nate Miller, CEO of Proving Ground; Patrick Chopson, Chief Product Officer, co-founder of cove.tool; and Zach Soflin, founder of Layer. Before we get into the conversation, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves briefly and give us a very short pitch on what their tool is before we get into all our questions. Anna?
Hi, my name is Anna Kenoff. I was an architect for many years in the city, and when the iPad came out, I got together with a few other architects and started creating sort of the tools that we needed beyond Netflix to take with us into the design process. So our suite of apps right now includes Morpholio Trace, which is basically the architect's app from beginning to end of the design process, and Morpholio Board, which is more for interior designers creating mood boards. And then we have Journal, which is drawing.
Hey everybody, Kyle Bernhardt, CRO at Testfit, longtime member of the AEC technology community. So I guess I'm the non-practicing guy, at least the token panelist that's technology focused exclusively. I'm more of a recovering mechanical engineer than I am an architect. But I've been in actually technology for a very long time, working at Autodesk for many years, and now at Testfit. And at Testfit, we do in 30 seconds what used to take hours or days to assess feasibility of a site for multifamily housing or industrial. Looking forward to the conversation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nathan Miller. I'm the CEO of Proving Ground. I'm an architectural designer by training, and I found myself midway through my career in the space of technology and design technology. Proving Ground is a hybrid business model. We do quite a bit of consulting services, helping architectural organizations, builders, and owners figure out their data-driven strategy. And we have a number of products that help our clients take advantage of their data, harvest information, make use of business intelligence, and create opportunities for automation.
Zach?
Hi, everybody. My name's Zach Soflin. I'm the founder of Layer. I was an architect prior to founding Layer. And Layer was really born out of a problem that I had on a preservation project at the Nebraska State Capitol. We had to gather a ton of information and data in the field and connect it back to our Revit model, and didn't really have a great way to do that efficiently. So we ended up creating Layer as kind of a prototype, realized we were solving a much bigger problem than just that particular project. And so we decided to launch it as a product a couple years ago, and it's kind of where we've been. So today, Layer is a flexible and easy to use toolkit for building information management. So if you're familiar with tools like Airtable or Smartsheets, you can think of Layer like those, but designed specifically for building professionals and their workflows.
Patrick Chopson here, one of the co-founders at cove.tool. It's a web-based application for doing energy modeling, daylight simulations, cost optimization, things like that, basically used around the world. But the main idea is we're trying to rapidly decarbonize the built environment. So really excited to be here today.
And we're excited to have you. So I've noticed there's a common interest between each of you in increasing client capabilities by transforming designers' relationship to data. Also a commitment to openness and collaboration, and a dedication to digital transformation. Each of you have a different approach to those kind of questions, and I think I'd like us to talk at a high level about your vision for transforming our industry. Each of you have created a unique tool that solves for certain problems. I guess the first question I have is what challenges or hesitations are you seeing with adopting new technologies across the industry? Where are the opportunities as you saw it for your specific tool? And also kind of what are the changes you'd like to see? I'll start with Anna on this question.
Hi, it's a good question. I mean, the truth of the matter is I really don't think that we are seeing a hesitation. I think people are really hungry for new kinds of tools, especially in the new work environment. I think we live in a world where, tech is being incorporated every day into our lifestyles in all these tiny little ways. And so people are very comfortable with the notion of how they're one with technology, right? With the Apple Watch and, all these other things that we're getting so used to. So I think people are really looking for very specific tools. I think onboarding can be a challenge in terms of how we get them to the tool and then, educated to the point to be a pro user. So I think that's something that maybe we all struggle with in terms of education, making time to educate people about, new processes. But I think people are very hungry and they're really looking for the tools that are not just gimmicks, but that really kind of combine in a really easy, free-flowing way processes that they want to do and then augment them, with technology, which is essentially what Trace is, right? It's drawing on the iPad, but taking it to a whole nother level. So incorporating the technology of Apple Maps so that you can find your shadows, so that you can draw your shadows, or AR so that you can find your perspectives better. So I think people are in fact very hungry to adopt these tools if we can integrate them in the right way.
Thank you. Kyle, what barriers are you seeing to adopting new tools like yours?
Well, let's talk. I can give you your answer for Testfit, and then I'll talk a little bit about just kind of more broadly, because I spent a lot of time thinking about this particular topic. It's been basically my whole career trying to crack this nut. In the case of Testfit, really what it comes down to is there is a need for information that can be served sometimes by the standard of care of the architectural practice, and in other cases it can't. And technology, and the reasons for that really just come down to the economics of real estate development. You've got a lot of work that needs to be done without a lot of money to be spent yet. So as a result, there isn't a huge services upside for a lot of the architectural practice, but at the same time, there's a concrete need for the overall development community, inclusive of architects, to be able to evaluate those sites. And so, the challenges within our segment is really more of the status quo. There's an expectation that, I'll pay a few thousand in fees and I'll get one result that comes back in about a week or two. And that's typically how I address this challenge. And so understanding that there's alternatives that typically come from really good collaboration between the development and the design services community, that can be better, is really the biggest challenge we have, is kind of raising awareness to that front. But I would say more broadly to this overall question, I spent a ton of time thinking about why isn't BIM getting more widely adopted, or all these other things. And, one of the biggest observations I'll share here, and then we can move to the next panelist, is, what's really abundantly clear to me is that technology alone is not the answer. As cool as it may be and however great it may demo, at the end of the day, if you're not influencing the economics of the delivery of the built environment in some sort of a significant way, you're not adjusting where the profit incentive lies, or you're not necessarily enabling a new service, it's very difficult to really break out in terms of leveraging technology to really drive your business forward, however cool it may make you feel. As a technologist that you're doing that, at the end of the day, we're working in a business, and the things you can leverage your technology to differentiate yourself from a business perspective, that's going to be an important differentiator. And to me, that's the biggest impediment, more so than it is technology posture for adoption, so much as it is whether that technology is in itself really changing the economics of the value chain. And if it does, boom, it's going to get adopted like hotcakes.
Nathan, similar question. What are the biggest challenges in impeding the use of your platform, or just kind of what are you solving for here?
Cool. Well, I'm gonna put on my consultant cap for a minute before I get over into the product cap. We do quite a bit of evaluation of practices in terms of defining strategies and tactics that can help them lead towards a digital transformation of sorts in some aspect of their practice. It might be BIM related, it might be a uses of data in other respects, and I can identify two primary areas where we see challenges or barriers manifest themselves within the culture of a design practice. The first one is risk aversion. And that's something that I think that anyone who spends 5 minutes in the world of building, design, and construction is going to be very familiar with. There is a high degree of risk aversion in our industry, and I think that when it comes to introducing new technologies and new capabilities, there is a sense that there can be profound impacts for those new processes, ranging from new forms of analysis that might impact the standard of care to creating new forms of digital assets that might extend or change a deliverable that we're used to. And I think part of the tactics to overcoming that is identifying areas where you are most comfortable taking risks first, and then building use cases off of those ideas. So there might be technologies like one of the areas that we're interested in is business intelligence. So being able to take data that you have, that data that you might have readily available to you, that can help serve to support your existing services might be an interesting entry point. The other side of this that we see quite a bit is in the space of professional biases. And these are things that we all have, and we all grow into over time. And over time, through professional experiences, you adopt habits and heuristics that can help inform you and guide you to decisions quickly as a professional. But they can also become problematic hindrances when it comes to being confronted with something new, a new way of doing things. And I think a point of critical evaluation we encourage a lot of our clients to take part in is to think about why you are doing something a certain way. And if the answer that comes back to you is, well, that's because this is the way we've always done it, is the only answer you can arrive at, that is probably an indication that there is an opportunity to transform that process and think about it differently. And we see this a lot when confronted with kind of the more radical or new emerging technologies that are hitting the market. AI is a good one, machine learning, those types of things where you're dealing with predictive models based on data that can sometimes run counter to the decision that you as an intuitive and experienced professional may make. That can scare a lot of people. So it's about, I think, finding those balances to like, oh, well, why did this lead me to this decision, and why was I doing the other thing before, and kind of taking on a way to critically evaluate that process, I think, is certainly important.
Fantastic. Zach, I guess your thoughts on what barriers you're seeing to adopting new technologies or digital transformation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would echo a lot of what's been said so far to this question. For us, like what we have noticed when we're approaching design firms, we can get a great response on a product demo. They can connect the idea to how it could actually save them time in the long run, and all of that all can be there and be present. And the actual moving forward with the product, or like taking a step forward, is still delayed by quite a bit. And I feel like a lot of it comes down to just the amount of time that firms have to I guess focus on adopting new technology and implementing it properly. For us, that's probably one of the biggest challenges we see is, I mean, obviously, like your profit is directly tied to how many billable hours you're completing on a project a lot of times. And so I think like setting aside deliberate time to evaluate these solutions and figure out where they're going to fit into your tech stack and integrate with the rest of the tools that you're using is important, and I think lacking in a lot of in a lot of companies. So I think that's definitely a major challenge that we see. I agree with Kyle mentioned that there needs to be kind of a value proposition for any new tool. Adopting tech for tech's sake is obviously pointless if it's not delivering value. But beyond that, like I said, I think teams need to set aside time to actually evaluate. Okay, is this going to save me time, and if so, it's worth investing the time and dollars into bringing on this new platform. So,
awesome. Patrick, thoughts on what was the problem that drove the development of cove.tool? What was the real meat of what you were trying to address?
Yeah, I think like usually the main problem that we were always confronting was cost, and how do you pay for sustainability consulting services, or how do you pay for all these things? And I think like what we found is that the real barrier to entry is not that people don't have time to test things, because there's always somebody who wants to test something, or that what it really came down to is understanding what the unit economics are of the architecture profession, and then being able to articulate that to the CFO of a particular firm, or the main principal who controls the money. So if you can explain to them how this works and how the training time is not too big, because training time is like overhead time. And if you can explain to them like what are the ways that will win more work with this particular method, and then who else is doing this? Like FOMO, fear of missing out, is really huge for architects. And then kind of getting down to what percentage of your fee for the particular project types that you do goes to this particular type of analysis. So like, let's say I have a tool that I'm selling, and if I come to you and you're do labs, and you do all your sustainability consulting out of house and none of it in house, it's going to be a much more difficult sell than like I do apartments and I could do all this work in house because it's much more simple. So establishing that, and then creating kind of right sizing the solution, I think, of whatever it is that you're selling to whatever it is that they're trying to do, and creating tiers, and understanding that there's certain things that everyone in the firm needs to do. There's certain things that a few specialized people need to do, and there's certain other small tasks that super specialists within the firm do, and like your super user, and understanding like where your particular technology that you're trying to implement, does it fall into those three tiers? And then how does that relate back to the CFO's problem of how do I make this business run? I think that is establishing that rubric and being able to identify those particular people really helps, I think, with implementing technology. But it's also the main barrier, I would say, is not being able to quantify what that means to the firm. And I think that's usually, for me, the biggest barrier, and unlocking those different gates is typically how I see our team overcome that here at cove.tool.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, there's something interesting in how each of you approach this, that you've come from a background within architecture, engineering, or function as consultants, but in some of the ways the tools you developed aren't necessarily putting the consultants out of business, but you're trying to make those tools and analyses simpler, easier, cheaper, faster, and more widespread. So there's something quite interesting about the challenge you presented yourself to both enable capacity increases, but also maybe take away like some of those specialists needs. I guess one question I think I have for the group is: do you find the products you've created something that will replace part of these existing tech stack, or is it something that was a critical gap you realized just wasn't really there, that those analyses were inaccessible or required external help, or just were not getting the kind of support they need within firms? I know with some of the specialty areas you work with, there might be an R&D group or a your technology group that focuses on those tools and develops them in-house. But I'm curious if you see replacing of the tech stack, or really it was filling in a need that you identified and created. I guess I'll start with Nathan on this question.
That's a great question. I think for us, if you look at a lot of the work that we put out there in terms of especially the product side, is that we have over time through the engagement of the messiness of projects, and I think the inherent messiness of navigating the culture of different business models and business types, we've kind of arrived at a set of solutions that look at bridging gaps between different existing applications and building on top of existing technology stacks. So I'll give an example of the tools that we've made that support business intelligence. One of the gaps that we've seen out there is the ability to kind of leverage and harvest data out of existing data-rich assets like Revit or other building information model types. We kind of exist in this kind of, I think as an industry, in this world of walled gardens of proprietary platforms. And sometimes it's very difficult to connect these kind of areas together. And so with one of our tools, Tracer in particular, provides the ability for a user to rapidly harvest all the information out of their model into a kind of a neutral, open database environment, at which point they can then build reporting systems on top of it using familiar out-of-the-box tools and Power BI with some custom visuals that we've designed and made, and then publish to the web and share it with others, all without having to write a single line of code, and built on top of tools that are readily available to architecture practices. And so I think some of those kinds of positionings that we've taken with the tools have really served, certainly us pretty well in terms of being able to like both understand an organization and their current technology stack, and then find ways of improving and helping them realize the value out of the tools that they have. Because I think one of our observations as consultants and service providers and people that are working with these organizations in different capacities is that people have a lot of really powerful technology on their desktop today, and only a fraction of it, I think, is being used to its fullest potential. And that's kind of what we want to help people move forward with.
Thank you. Anna, thoughts on this question?
I mean, this is a big one for us. We, I'm never a this or that person. I'm a both and. The main technology that we were trying to bring back, really was the pencil. I think that what's most interesting for us, we came in at a time when it was like, oh, can we code our way into a building? Can we turn the data into this or that? And I think we really felt like bringing back the kind of hand drawing and thinking and the conversation around design, the qualitative things that shape the quantitative data was really important to a good, solid design process. So you'll never get all the way through, with the pencil. Like, our app is actually most interesting when you're drawing maybe on top of something that you brought from CAD and then back to CAD. When you're sketching on top of a 3D model, it's really important for us that we integrate super fluidly with other technologies. So in and out of SketchUp, in and out of Vectorworks, through Trace. And then you combine kind of the technology of Apple Maps that tells you where you are and exactly what that shadow is in the world. And then you take that into AR. And I think it's really most interesting when you think about these big tech items and then how they become the specific tool, the shadow maker for architects, So how do we kind of take these big things and turn them into the day-to-day things that really like augment the process? So I think it's more, not less.
Definitely. Zach, thoughts on this question of where you fit within the stack or the critical gaps you found in the development of your tool?
Yeah, great question. So we really, I think we're unknowingly responding to a data problem that has existed within the industry for a long time. There's a stat that we point to quite a bit from an FMI study that around 13% of working hours are spent looking for project data in the AEC world. That's a lot of time. It's like 5 or 6 hours a week for every employee, and that adds up quickly. And so I think, like I said, we kind of built Layer to address that problem unknowingly, and I think that's where we realize pretty quickly the value that we were delivering is connecting all of these different sources of project information and making them available everywhere. Those are kind of some of our biggest value props when we're walking into a firm is really the democratization of like of software. I mean, 30 to 40% of teams may not be familiar with or be able to work within a Revit model or BIM for that matter. And so like making all that information available to the entire project team and making it actionable where they can actually build out their workflows on top of that information is I think where we found ourselves fitting in. So with that said, like our kind of approach to this has been, rather than like building a piece of software around a specific workflow, we've focused more on building out a toolkit that teams can use to build out their own workflows and deploy them across their teams. So we're kind of a level deeper as it relates to that. So generally, when we're going into a firm, a lot of times the value that we're bringing is we're able to replace 2 or 3 tools that they may be using today, or tools that aren't specifically designed for this specific use case or something like that. They can replace with it, or it might just be workflows that they've created, a Dynamo definition or Grasshopper definition or something like that to complete. A good example actually for us is like room data sheets. That's something that like we talk to firms every day who everybody has a different process, and it usually has to do with a spreadsheet, Dynamo work, and probably InDesign for layout and all this other stuff. And so we're kind of fitting in to that gap, allowing them to build out those workflows all within kind of one tool instead of a myriad of tools that are kind of connected together, and maybe only 1 or 2 people know how it actually works or how they actually connect. So anyway, this is my thoughts.
That's fantastic. Kyle, I'd like to hear from you on this.
Sure. So, we're talking about, hey, where's Testfit? How's that fit into the new tech stack? Is that adding something new? Is it replacing that sort of thing? And, when we talk to most of our subscribers, what they tell us is that Testfit isn't necessarily doing a novel job as a piece of software, in that people have been test fitting for years and centuries. But it is doing a novel job as a piece of technology to connect the understanding of the spatial program with the fundamentals of the requirements of the project. Typically, those things are kind of, you need specialty expertise to do the test fit, and sitting over in a spreadsheet is the fundamentals of your pro forma. And in many ways, Testfit kind of integrates those together the same way you can think of Revit integrating a model in the drawings that came out of it. Those two things are tightly coupled. So we kind of think of Testfit as, well, we don't think of it, literally is augmenting the teams who have the opportunity to use it on a project. And it is replacing a process that had been driven much more on kind of human intuition and 25 years of experience, which, while very good, is not perfect. And the ability to have that in real time is very much augmenting the day-to-day for our subscribers. So that's how we think about it.
And it seems like a great tool for rapid iteration. I mean, you being able to combine all that data and those specific capabilities to really quickly iterate and see how it works, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess a question for Patrick: what are the biggest roadblocks to efficient collaboration you're seeing? All of these tools have the ability to collaborate, are interoperable with most of them with one another as well. They're all connected, but I'm curious about the roadblocks to efficient collaboration more generally.
Yeah, I would say like the most important aspect is that tools that people are building or working with have interoperable APIs that are like allowing a continuous data feed from one tool to another. So one of the things, that's something we've been really focused on, is connecting to other platforms and other companies. I know we've been collaborating with Testfit on that to send a data stream. So instead of thinking about interoperability maybe in the early 2000s sense, where it's like we have a file that can be opened in another software, instead making a direct pipe that's linking that data from our platform over here to like, anybody else's platform. So instead of everyone having to build everything, you can instead have each person can build the thing that's really good. Like if we have the fastest daylight simulation in the world, we have no idea how to do an automated apartment block design or something. Like that's not something that we'll ever do. So being able to kind of connect those things together, or like, Nathan has some super amazing tools that everybody on the call should be checking out, and all the things that they're doing. So like we could connect and then send our daylight meshes to him to show up in a really awesome grasshopper definition or something like that. But that allows us to all collectively attack the problem at the way that we know best. And instead of having everyone having to own that process themselves of like, okay, now I got to be an energy modeling expert. Like, no, it takes 2 years and a couple $1 million to build a really good energy modeling application. But maybe it's easy enough for someone else to just plug in for a few cents of simulation and do it that way. So those are the kinds of things that I think we're really excited about, is seeing the ecosystem broadly developing, where you got things like Speckle, that's an open source tool. There's a lot of ways that we can all work together to solve the carbon problem from our perspective, rather than everyone having to do it all. I think that's a really exciting thing. So it kind of allows maybe some of these non-monolithic apps, so ADESC aside, we can actually work together to really solve problems in a more iterative and fast fashion, which I'm super stoked about.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from all the panelists on how the use of these technologies, of tools, have changed over the course of your careers. I know things change very quickly, and each of you have been developing these tools for quite a long time and have been in the industry for even longer. And so from the point you started to really develop these technologies to where we are right now, what's changed, and kind of where would you like it to go next? I think I'll start with Nathan on that one.
Sure. That's a great question. In many of the lectures I give, I will start with a timeline of kind of where we started and where we're at today, as a bit of a history lesson. And I think this kind of fundamental interest in, I think, interoperability and workflows that can stitch together the technology stack, help us leverage data and support the broader team workflow, was really born out of my first part of my career as a designer. I remember when I was working on stadiums in China, really burning the midnight oil and exhausting possibilities with and figuring out how to glue these pieces together to solve a particular problem. And some of the very initial interoperability explorations that I was doing at that time were very much point solutions, very bespoke to a particular set of project needs. And then as my career progressed as a consultant, and then the formation of Proving Ground, a lot of those lessons learned started to inform a generalization of solutions that addressed a lot of the problems that persisted then and continue to persist today in terms of being able to bridge a lot of these technology gaps. I think a lot of the product work that we're doing, as well as the services work, is born out of an understanding of the problem and working with our stakeholders, our clients, our customers, to understand those problems and then start to build solutions from them. And I think I have a couple of remarks maybe for later on in the discussion about continuous improvement, but the idea of not being afraid to do iterations on a product or service and figuring out what works and what doesn't in terms of being able to address the problem is super important to be able to like take something from a point solution or something that's bespoke into something that can work for a larger audience. And I can point to some of the tools that we've been doing with Rhino and Revit integration. A lot of those tools started with grasshopper definitions and these very gnarly scripts that could only be used by one person. And now we've kind of evolved that over the years into a product that can be used by anyone, including non-experts. And I think that's a very kind of important kind of point, kind of being able to think about how you go from an idea, how that idea might apply to kind of your own expertise, but then how do you deliver that idea to an audience that may not be experts And I certainly can guess that the folks over at Cove probably have a lot of thoughts on that as well, in terms of the democratization of capability over time. I think there's a lot to be said on that subject.
Patrick, you want to jump in on that? You seem to have a lot of head shaking here.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, I think the most important thing is to realize that there are just that there's tiers within the firm and levels of expertise. Like, you're not ever trying to create a tool that replaces a specialized consultant, but you're trying to raise all boats equally with the same tide. And like, the ease of use is how you raise it would be better to have all buildings simulated to maybe 50% accurate than to have no buildings and then only a few that are simulated to within, 1/1000th accuracy. It's kind of one of those things like where you see, for the last 10 years, there was like maybe only 40% of projects were getting an energy simulation. And then suddenly within the last couple of years, we've seen it go to 60%. And that's because tools have suddenly become more accessible, and also people, see their house on fire and things like that and realize that they got to do something. But at the same time, it's really coming down to, many of the people who are on this call are making changes to how the workflows work so that more and more people can participate in that process. That's something I'm like super excited about.
Fantastic. We're getting some interesting questions from the audience, and one of the big themes in the comments has been about friction, when to embrace it, when to try to smooth friction. And one of the ways we kind of think about that is how should someone designing the practice think about the tool chain in their workflow, where how these technologies like both make things easier, but also ones that actually make things more efficient or better, or change the actual workflow. I guess I'd like to hear from Anna and then Kyle.
I'm sorry, how do they make it more efficient and change the workflow, you're saying? Mm-hmm. I want to make sure I understood that. Kyle, go ahead. I want to make sure I understood that question.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. No problem, Anna. When you add a new tool I think about it in terms of jobs to be done. I always like thinking about this in terms of the jobs to be done framework. And, when your technology can do a new job for you, then all of a sudden you have opportunities to either deliver a new service you couldn't do before, do the same service on a shorter period of time or with better capabilities. And what we're finding, at least with Testfit, is the ability to directly control the building configuration, but have a large amount of control over that output, allows teams to craft, and I'm choosing the word craft versus generate 7,000 options you pick the best one of, but to craft 3 or 4 meaningful options in collaboration with the developer in a period of time that previously could only really do one because people were too busy counting parking stalls for the remaining time. And so what we're finding is that technology doing a new job is enabling teams to work in a more collaborative way, because for their time and money budget, they can now do more. And that's, a pretty powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions we have from the audience is, where do we see the biggest gap in the AEC tech stack as it currently stands? Is it in design tools? Is it collaboration? Is it in the management of data? Where do you see, I'll throw this to Anna first. Where do you see that biggest gap at the moment?
Biggest gap. Biggest gap I think people are a little bit overrun with the amount of technology and data and building information that they have thrown at them, honestly. And so I think the gap is really in the next, I think it's somewhat recent that we've been able to really harness all of this stuff and then start to turn it into all of these specific tools. So I think that as we start to make people better and better at using those, I think we're going to really hit a point. I think for a long time it was like, oh, we're going to do sustainable projects. Well, now every project has to be sustainable. We're just we're kind of just hitting a tipping point where people, I think it's like almost a new era in terms of people really understanding like every building has to be smarter and better. And there's a lot of things out there, and I've got to, you know, really figure out how to use this stuff. So I think we're in for like a great, you know, next few years.
One of the big questions we have is how can firms reinvent themselves on being technology first and client first, and are those positions in conflict? I'm really wanting to hear where you think we're going, where we should be going. We're running low on time, but I do want to get Zach back in here for comment, and then a few more quick questions.
Sure. So just to confirm that you basically how firms can change to be more like adopt technology and be sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, how firms can reinvent themselves with their focus on bringing in new technology, but also putting the clients first, finding that balance.
Oh, I got it. Yeah, good deal. Well, I mean, like, I think obviously, again, I'll go back to like, I think like firms need to be able to take a step back and evaluate where they're at today and evaluate their tech stack and what tools they're using instead of just, you know, bringing on a new tool because it might solve an immediate problem. Taking a more like holistic approach to the way that they're evaluating the tools that they're bringing on, and obviously, like, I mean, how we're delivering value to the client, in how we use technology, whether it's through like efficiency in the design process or improved quality. I mean, every tool is going to offer a different kind of value prop to them. It's just a matter of like, I think like evaluating how they're utilizing the technology holistically. Like Nathan, I know we'll come in and do a technology evaluation with a company and look at their picture holistically, right? So like to identify the gaps and the holes for where they may need to find a solution or may need to improve versus just you know identifying a piece of software that might solve a temporary problem. I don't know if I'm saying that clearly, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Nathan?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take a position where to somewhat challenge the premise of this question. Because I think even as a tech, I would consider Proving Ground to be generally a technology company, but I wouldn't even really describe ourselves as being technology first. And also, I don't know that I would necessarily describe ourselves to be as being client first. And let me explain why. I think from a technology first perspective, I think we as an industry also need to be very critical and skeptical of technology as it is positioned in a kind of problem solution chain or methodology. I think there is kind of in some ways a bit of a gap going back to the previous question in terms of knowledge about technology and skills related to technology, to where we haven't yet in many cases developed critical attitudes towards tools to determine where they can produce the most value and the most meaningful results in a business case. And I think that's ultimately, when it comes to technology first, I would sort of say we need to really think about it in terms of solutions first, and a critical understanding of the problems that we're trying to solve. In terms of client first, I think as a singular objective, that can be problematic because it starts to suggest that there are other components to a project or an effort that are secondary. For example, the needs of kind of my team, for example. You don't want to deprioritize, certain objectives when you're dealing with a team atmosphere. So I like to kind of think about that more as a people first situation, wherein we're trying to encompass the idea that there's a collective set of team goals, both up from the standpoint of the innovator and the consumers of technology, and that we need healthy and productive feedback loops to exist between clients, customers, and the teams that are making new solutions. And I think part of that feedback loop is the idea that, we may be able to show a client or a customer something that they didn't know or know they needed in order to realize the potential. So I don't think we want to discount that. I think there's always a risk if you go client first, or you go back to the Fordism of, if I asked everyone what they wanted, they would get a faster horse instead of the automobile, right? So anything as innovators, we need to be thinking about that process very quickly.
Can I add something to that?
Quickly, yes.
I just want to say I agree with you, and I think really what we want to be is design first. And I think the most successful firms that I've seen or been in over the years are really committed to finding, creating, and developing a really solid design process. And when you have a good process, that benefits the clients, it benefits the people that work for you by not wearing them out, and it benefits the project. And so if you think about not investing in software, the time that it takes to buy it, the time that it takes to train everyone, but you think about that you're investing in your firm's design process, which is at its heart your firm, then I think you start to think about, a much stronger culture and more success for everyone.
I want to thank all of our panelists.